as we've been talking about, Mike, markets lower on fears of an escalating trade war. You're a macro guy. You're international economics and policy correspondent. Is this a rethink of U.S. U.S. policy, U.S. trade policy? It's just a social media post.
Yeah, I think, well, there's a couple things going on, and I think Eric's right that the markets are using this as an excuse to sell off because we don't know exactly what's going to happen. The Chinese have said that they're going to put new restrictions on rare earths and super magnets and things like that that have been under discussion. And Xi and Trump are supposed to meet at APEC later this month and talk about this, and there was thought that they might reach some kind of deal. Some analysts think that this is basically the Chinese trying to get some negotiating leverage. And Trump doesn't want to be backed into a corner, so he's negotiating back in the kind of language that he tends to use. The Chinese, the main body of the Chinese new restrictions wouldn't hit till November or December. So it's not something that's imminent, and it could be that this is just all posturing, and one has to hope that at this point. But that may be why we've got a 2% fall, or roughly 2% fall, and nothing worse. I think if the president had really come out and said, I'm going to jack up these tariffs to 50, 60, 70%, then you would see a much bigger reaction.
These comments, of course, are coming before he's set to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping a little bit later this month. Have we heard any details about whether that meeting is still going to be taking place in the wake of the social media posts?
Well, we haven't heard that it's off. The Chinese did not mention it's off, and the president said, I don't see any reason to meet right now, but he didn't say I'm not going to. So at this point, I think we just have to wait and see how this plays out over the next couple of days. Maybe he gets it off. Maybe he's mad because of the Nobel Prize, and instead of going after Norway, which we all thought he'd do this morning, he's just taking it out on China for the time being.
But he was thanked by the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, yeah.
And then he reposted this.
Yes. Basically, she said, we're counting on President Trump and our friends in democracies around the world to continue the struggle for Venezuela. She didn't say, thank you, President Trump, exactly.
Well, let's shift gears a little bit, Mike, and talk about reductions in force, the idea of layoffs, permanent layoffs. Russ Vought earlier today, White House budget director, saying the reductions in workforce have begun. He's referring to the federal government's term for layoffs here. Do we know how many? Do we know who? Do we know where?
What we know is that the White House, senior White House officials told Bloomberg News that it would be thousands. Representative of the American Federation of State, Local, and Government Employees said that they heard 1,300. But there's no exact number at this point. It does seem to be affecting many agencies. I've heard as many as 9. And this is obviously going to provoke lawsuits from the federal unions. The administration and Vought say this is necessary because of the government shutdown, but it's not. They've never done this before.
Yeah, why
the workers aren't being paid right now, so it doesn't. It's just. It's also theater. Now, does the administration? They could be setting this up as a bargaining chip. You know, Democrats come to the table and they concede something, and the president says, "All right, we won't fire these people." Because remember how this went with the Doge thing. People were on the payroll, off the payroll, on the payroll again. So this could also be a big smokescreen.
I'm wondering how you think that kind of impacts what could be an already weak labor market that we're seeing. We had Governor Christopher Waller from the Fed saying job growth has been negative for the last few months. The labor market is his biggest concern. Of course, that's what we've also heard from Jerome Powell. These firings, wouldn't that make the labor market even weaker, or is it not quite related?
There's not enough people getting fired. I mean, it is terrible for them individually, but at this point, if you said thousands, I mean, there are something like 2 million federal employees, so it wouldn't mean that many people are going to affect the economy, but it does contribute to the overall sense that the country is not doing well, that the economy is not doing well, and that may hit consumer confidence, and And the more layoffs you have in your neighborhood, the more you start to worry about yourself, and then you cut back on spending, and that's how recessions begin, basically, is a confidence matter. So it's not good news in that sense, but it's not something that we will really see in the economy. What ends up happening with government shutdowns is spending is delayed, but it's not completely gone. People will get their back pay, in theory. The administration's threatened that too, but the law says they get paid, and then they'll go make the important payments that they have to make. And I'm sure they'll use their charge cards for groceries and things like that in the meantime.
Well, speaking of getting paid, Argentina is about to get paid to the tune of $20 billion. Is it fair to call this a bailout?
It's fair to call it a bailout, but they're not really going to get $20 billion from the U.S. Essentially, they're calling it a swap line, which it isn't exactly either. The swap line is an agreement between two central banks, one that needs dollars, sends money to the Fed, and the Fed sends the equivalent amount in dollars to them so that their companies in that country can pay their dollar-denominated bills. And then they send it back and when the crisis is over and the Fed sends them back their money. This is more like a rescue package along the lines of what happened with Mexico in 1994, where the U.S. used the Exchange Stabilization Fund and agreed to guarantee Mexican bonds that couldn't be sold because there was a concern about whether or not they would default. And so the U.S. guaranteed those. The U.S. bought some of the assets. They didn't give Mexico cash directly. And I don't think we're giving Argentina cash directly, but it'll be a system set up like that.
Is it a little different than Mexico back then, though, because we share a border with Mexico? The stability of Mexico is in our best interest because it's such a large trading partner, at least right now. I mean, Argentina is a little bit of a different story. It seems more political.
Well, there's definitely a political angle to it, and it just kind of depends on what your cynicism meter goes up to. Argentina is obviously a poster child for bad financial management. They owe the IMF billions and billions of dollars. They've defaulted something like 23 times. And you could argue that it could be a sort of economic domino in the way we saw things happen in the Asian financial crisis. But there's also the idea that a lot of the hedge funds that hedge fund leaders who worked with Scott Bessent over the years have loaded up on Argentine debt, distressed debt, because they can buy it at a discount. And if the Argentine peso keeps falling as it has and is predicted to do if they lose the congressional elections coming up, then these people lose a lot of money. And if the U.S. can prop up the peso, then it helps Bessent's friends. Now, I don't have any evidence one way or another, but the New York Times is reporting this. Paul Krugman did a column on it today. So that is something for, I don't think you have to go as far as a tinfoil hat. Maybe saran wrap hat or something like that that could be.
Maybe it's in the same drawer where you would find the tinfoil.
Well, and you get in these situations, you get people who are nervous about the impact on American investors and funds. We saw the same thing happen with Greece, and Greece was definitely going to default, but it was handled very gingerly so that it didn't cause systemic problems.
Well, this coming from the Treasury Department, but certainly the next Fed chair might be thinking about the implications of this. And that's kind of where we want to end with you, Mike. We learned earlier today some other names that could be in the running or are in the running for Fed chair finalists. Rick Rieder, Michelle Bowman, Chris Waller, Kevin Warsh, Kevin Hassett. What's the timeline here? Is there anyone else to add?
This is a CNBC report that they are the final five.
Okay.
And that they would do another round of interviews, and then sometime maybe in December, the president would nominate someone to the Stephen Myron seat where the term expires at the end of January. And that person would be essentially the de facto Fed chair in waiting. And then if Jay Powell resigns, they could put Steve Myron back in that seat or somebody else. We don't have any other outside confirmation of that, but it certainly tracks with what the president has been saying. He's called the Kevins and Chris Waller the finalists for some time. Michelle Bowman might be a little bit of a DEI here because we know they like her in the regulatory role that she's in, and Rick Reeder obviously has a good reputation in the markets. It depends on what the president ultimately ends up wanting in a Fed chair. How much of a splash does he want to make in a sense of a rock falling in the pond and sending out ripple? How much does he want to upset the apple cart, and how much can he do without upsetting the markets? So this is going to be something to watch over the next couple of weeks, because once we get to an announcement, there's going to be a lot of reaction to that as well.
Well, we'll certainly be talking to you many times between now and then. Michael McKee, Bloomberg News International Economics and Policy Correspondent, joining us here in the Bloomberg Businessweek studio. Mike, have a good weekend.